to share a story about my great-great-grandfather and his wife. Now, my great-great-grandfather was Dr. G.P. Reagan, who settled in Oakville in 1870, and his wife, Alabama Tip Edwards Reagan. Now, my great-great-grandfather had come in as a doctor in the area, and he had enlisted in the Texas Rangers along with his practice of taking care of the citizens of Live Oak County in the brush country and the settlers. And he also had enlisted when Oakville had brought in the Texas Rangers to bring some peace to the town, because it was known as a violent town. To be honest, there was 40 hangings over a certain period of time in the old hanging tree there by the Oak County jail. There were gunfights in the street. There were deals gone bad, business deals gone sideways. There was just a lot of taking the law into their own hands, to the point where they had to revamp and rebuild the jail from the original version to keep the locals from going in and settling the score on their own. So it was, kind of, I guess, as I have read, Dodge City of the South. There wasn't much law and order, and I think the law that was there at the time turned their cheek, didn't want to deal with the chaos and the mess. So those settlers into that area that wanted to make a go in Oakville, that wanted to establish a community, they called in the Texas Rangers and to bring in some law and order, and they needed a doctor to patch them up and keep them going. So my great-great-grandfather enlisted, and that's what he did, along with taking care of his neighbors and the community in the surrounding area. And so there was this time where the county judge got word that the Indians were going to raid Oakville. Now, my great-great-grandfather, Dr. G.P., he had taken off on a call. Now, my great-great-grandmother, Alabama Tip, she got the message that the raid was coming, and she told him she wasn't going nowhere. She was not going to leave the house. Her husband was gone. Doctor's out on a call. I'm not leaving. Sent another messenger. I'm not going in. You tell the judge I'm not coming with the kids. Now, they had this fellow that worked for him, a younger guy, and I think he's pretty much almost a kid himself, but a young man that worked around the place and tended to things when the doctor was out and about, and helped tend the yard and the animals and the pastures or whatever. And he said, "Oh, Miss Reagan, we probably should go." And she's like, "No, we're not going anywhere." Well, the judge finally came himself to tell her to load them kids up and get to the courthouse, because all the men were going to protect the women and the children for this raid that the scout had heard was coming that night. And she pretty much told him in no other terms that she was not leaving. Her and the kids would stay at home. When her husband came in, he wanted a hot meal and wanted his family there, and she wasn't going to be gone. She was standing her ground. And the judge, I guess he thought he had some pull, but apparently us Reagans get our hard-headedness from way back, because she didn't budge, and the judge went back, and great-great-grandmother didn't go anywhere, kids didn't go anywhere, and this young guy that worked for him stayed put with her. Well, about nightfall, after they had tried one more time to get her to go, they'd sent one more person out there. She said no again. No means no. I ain't going nowhere. They rode off, and she said, "Help me gather the youngsters, and we're going to go down to the creek." And she grabbed the kids, and she had help with the kids and a blanket, and they had them all in tow and had her gun with her. They went down into the creek, and she put out a pallet with the quilts, and she laid all the kids down, and she got them all bedded down and quiet. And that young hired hand that she better be quiet. Because if he made a noise and the Indians heard him because of him, that she'd take care of him herself. And he said, "Oh no, Miss Reagan, I would die for these babies in you. I would take the bullet first for you and these babies. Don't you worry." Well, it wasn't 5 minutes, as the story goes, and he was sound asleep just like the youngins on that pallet. No clue what was going on. But Tip, she stayed awake. She held onto that gun and she watched every shadow, every movement, listened for every sound. And all that came by was an old coyote. And he got lucky because she didn't want to give away her position. And he just moseyed on along. Now, about daybreak, a little before daybreak, as the story goes, there was all kinds of shooting and chaos coming from town, bullets ringing and clattering and clanging of guns being fired, like there was a full-on war going on. So when it came daylight, Tip thought she was going to look toward Oakville and just see a huge pillar of smoke where the Indians had gone through and burned down Oakville. And when the daylight broke and she looked toward Oakville, there wasn't a bit of smoke going. There were no flames or smoke or nothing. She sent the young man into town to check to see what was going on. And he came back with a report that all was well. The Indians never came. Come to find out, they went a ways down the river and they raided another little smaller community that wasn't as protected. They didn't get a whole lot, but that's where the raid happened. But that didn't explain all the gunfire and the no smoke. Come to find out, one of the men that was on guard through the night saw a shadow and thought it was an Indian and got trigger happy, and he fired. And when he fired, all the men started shooting. They'd emptied their rounds into the darkness and into the shadows, only to just cause a mass ruckus and burn up some shells and heat up their barrels, but nothing was even there. And GP came home, got an earful about the story, got a warm meal, and got to see his family. And when I shared that story the other day at the fairgrounds, I chose that story because it's not just about my family. It's about the families in Oakville and Live Oak County as a whole that settled there. They didn't just pass through. They weren't just coming to see what was going on in Texas in the 1800s, late 1800s. They were coming to settle. They were coming to dig their heels into the ground. And in my case, in Oakville, my family, along with the other families that settled there, where there are still descendants, including myself, my children, and my grandchildren. I'm 5th generation. My kids are 6th. My grandkids are 7th generation. And I'm not the only family that's that way in Oakville or Live Oak County. And we, as a whole, as Oakvillians, I guess, we dug our heels in to the banks of the Sulphur, right there by the new Oasis, and hung on, just like my great-grandmother. You're not going to push me out. You're not going to make me scared. You're not going to get me to run or to leave or to hide. I'm going to stand my ground. I'm going to put down my pallet. I'm going to pick up my gun. I'm going to protect my family and what we stand for, and I'm going to be here. And I think that sums up all the families in Oakville over the years that have stood their ground. It's more than just a town to us. It's a legacy. It's a heritage. It's a piece of history that ties us all together. Some of you might know that Oakville lost the county seat in 1919. Officially, it moved to Georgia West. But Oakville wasn't just a county seat. It wasn't just a booming South Texas town between Corpus and San Antonio, or between Mexico and the Texas coast. It had a heart steeped in the people that put the roots down there. The Dr. G.P. Reagan and his wife Alabama are just examples of the kind of people that you find in Oakville still today, because that same attitude, that same mentality, that same faith in God and family holds us all together. So thanks for listening to my story about my great-great-grandparents, and maybe I'll add another one in the next few days. I just feel drawn to not let history die. As we let history die, what are our kids and grandkids and great-grandkids going to know about not just us, but our family and where we live? Maybe you have a story. Maybe you should start keeping some kind of record. Maybe you don't like to do videos. Write it down. Start a book for your family, for your community. We all have a story to tell. Don't slight yourself. All right. A few ramblings from behind the steering wheel. Y'all have an awesome day.